Just when we thought it was case closed over McLaren's ingenious but legal brake system design, there's now been a fresh flare-up in its ongoing battle with Red Bull over exactly how McLaren manages rear tyre temperatures better than anyone else. This latest chapter in a simmering fight between the two F1 teams has exposed for the first time some of the wildest theories that Red Bull has come up with to explain what McLaren is up to. But now, amid the chase for answers on what exactly McLaren is doing, one fascinating use of technology has not been immediately ruled out as illegal by the FIA. The chase for answers about why Red Bull beat McLaren at its own game at Imola has taken a fresh twist, with it now emerging that the FIA issued 2 of its advisory technical directives in the days leading up to the Emilia-Romagna Grand Prix. Red Bull insiders think it's no coincidence that the FIA's intervention in clarifying how it interprets the rules came ahead of a weekend where McLaren's form appeared to fall away. But McLaren sees things differently, insisting the car it ran at Imola was not impacted at all by the TDs the FIA issued. Again, McLaren feels that rivals are mistaken in thinking it has some magic bullet solution that's made the MCL39 such a potent force in F1. It's repeatedly stated any advantage it has in F1 this year is simply down to good engineering. The pre-Imola technical directives covered 2 separate areas. One, clarifying the materials and mounting of the skid blocks so teams can't circumvent the probe tests used to measure the depth of the plank after races. You may remember this flared up quite a bit in mid-2022, and there have been several exclusions for excessive plank wear since, most recently on Lewis Hamilton's Ferrari in China. Quite who this TD was aimed at is unknown, but any team exploiting the skids would have had to raise their car up for Imola. Senior sources at McLaren were clear they weren't forced to make any changes to their car, nor the way it was run. Of greater interest and more significance in terms of the season-long attention there's been on McLaren's advantage in controlling tyre temperatures was the second Imola TD. This document was different to the skid block one in that it didn't offer any formal guidance or changes to previous advice about how the governing body would interpret the current regulations. Instead, it was the publication of a communication between the governing body and Red Bull relating to some questions posed by Red Bull about devices and procedures that could potentially be allowed to help with tyre cooling. This type of dialogue between teams and the governing body, where ideas are suggested only to be ruled out, is frequently used to smoke out concepts that rivals could be using to exploit grey areas in the regulations. With the FIA often publishing to all teams its guidance under such circumstances, this effectively becomes a formal notification about systems or procedures which the FIA feels teams would not be allowed to run. So, by Red Bull querying design ideas that it would like to introduce and being told no, this effectively stops any other teams continuing to run any similar system if that's what they've been doing up to that point. It's not clear if this has actually happened, that what Red Bull has been told definitely isn't okay has changed what any other teams were doing. But Red Bull definitely has suspicions that something has changed on the McLaren since Miami that resulted in that car losing its massive advantage in managing rear tyre temperatures. The correspondence is fascinating as it offers us the first proper insight from a competitor about theories on what McLaren could have been up to and what the FIA thinks about some of these design ideas. The race has seen a copy of this technical directive, which includes a host of questions from Red Bull about design ideas and procedures relating to tyre cooling, plus some responses from the FIA on what it thinks is and isn't allowed. One area of discussion regards clarification about the use of gases within the tyre, and especially the circumstances by which teams can switch out the Pirelli-supplied air. The FIA allows, through a combination of the technical regulations and previous technical directives, just one exchange of gas. Questions are asked about teams doing this exchange from one of their own reservoirs, taken from Pirelli sources, which the FIA says is allowed. Further questions are asked about whether the rules that state any form of cooling that may affect the tyre or wheel whilst the car is in the garage or pit lane is prohibited cover what teams can do on the grid. The idea here would obviously be for a team to exploit this and deploy some cooling tricks once the cars are on the grid that would help better manage tyres. While the FIA accepts the grid is not explicitly mentioned in the regulations, it suggests that cooling or heating of wheels to control temperatures on the grid would fall foul of Article 10.8.4d, which outlaws anything that helps teams warm up or maintain tyre temperatures. Questions are also asked about teams cooling or heating their garages to influence temperatures, with the FIA stating it will not ban the use of air conditioning devices to maintain a comfortable work environment. However, where it found that this activity was being used to influence tyre temperatures, then the FIA would step in. Another section of this discussion involves a clarification of the use of any fluids within the wheel assembly to help better manage temperatures. The FIA divides this up into two separate topics, gas and liquid. It states that the use of gas in the wheel drums is allowed, providing the wheel design complies with the regulations and no other rules are contravened. However, any significant leakages of gas from the wheel drum to help cool or warm the wheel rim would not be allowed. In terms of liquids, the FIA is clear that these are not allowed to be within the wheel drum, with the exception of the brake's hydraulic systems. The most fascinating part of this correspondence between Red Bull and the FIA is some of the design ideas put forward as ways that could potentially help with managing tyre temperatures, most of which refer to some kind of liquid being used or transferred to the wheel assembly to aid cooling. Here, we can reveal these suggestions for the first time. Fluid-filled skins in the wheel assembly. One idea is to enclose a cooling fluid within laminate skins of the wheel bodywork. There would be no duty of the team under the technical regulations to explain the purpose of this fluid, but it would essentially be there to effect the heat transfer between the skins of the wheel bodywork. The idea is that the current F1 technical regulations that detail the size and shape of components include inlet or outlet ducts for the purpose of cooling, up to the components they are intended to provide cooling for. Such ducts consist of surfaces in contact with the airstream, external flow to begin with, and then internal flow. Therefore, the interpretation of the rules has to be that any volume between these surfaces forming ducts is not in contact with any airflow and is therefore not bodywork, so can be filled with fluids. The argument then would be that any fluid trapped in such a volume is likewise not bodywork and may perform a function of heat transfer by conduction without the liquid moving, so would not breach the requirement for wheel bodywork to be rigidly secured to the upright. The ducts would also be impervious to trap the fluid and comply with rules regarding aerodynamic influence. I guess we could loosely call this wheel bodywork water. But the FIA said it would consider such a device illegal on two grounds, assuming that by fluid the idea meant liquid. The first is that it felt this would be a breach of Article 11.5 that states liquid cooling of the brakes is forbidden. Plus, it felt that it may contravene Article 10.8.4d, which states that tyre blankets are the only things allowed to heat tyres, and nothing other than the forward motion of the car being driven is permitted for heating the wheels, hubs or brakes, or maintaining their temperature if they are already warm. It was also queried whether a team could make use of an allowance in the regulations for minimal incidental leakage by letting the fluid pass through the carbon fibre laminate. This leakage could either flow into the airstream or onto mechanical components with the aim of boosting cooling. On this front, the FIA again said a firm no. A fluid reservoir within the wheel bodywork. The idea here would be to have a reservoir of cooling fluid that would be held within the wheel bodywork, which could then be deployed to help with cooling. The fluid could then be transferred to a wheel bodywork duct via a pipe with the feed generated by the car's acceleration and momentum. The FIA deemed that it would consider such a design illegal because it would be considered liquid cooling of the brakes, falling foul of Article 11.5, and may also contravene Article 10.8.4d regarding the banning of systems to help control tyre temperatures. A separate suggestion that made use of the liquid passing through the laminate thanks to the laminate being incidentally porous, i.e. full of small holes allowing liquid to flow into the airstream or onto mechanical components, was also dismissed by the FIA on the same grounds. Fluid hidden in mechanical components. This idea is similar to the concept of having a reservoir for cooling fluid within the wheels, except this time it would not be a standalone element. Instead, the fluid would be stored within a component defined as being associated with mechanical functioning of the car, before being transferred to the wheel bodywork to help with cooling. The design could be made in such a way that the fluid would pass directly from the mechanical component it's housed in to the airstream within the wheel bodywork, or through incidental leaking. The FIA ruled this one out on the same grounds as before: illegal liquid cooling of the brakes and it being a system that could help maintain tyre temperatures. A different system was also suggested whereby the cooling fluid was simply transferred from one mechanical component in the wheel bodywork to help cool another mechanical component. This again was deemed illegal on the same grounds as before. The drinks bottle trick. One of the more intriguing suggestions was to use a system whereby the fluid that's stored in the driver's drinking bottle is used to help cool the wheel bodywork. As F1's rules don't currently state that any fluids within the driver's drinks bottle are exclusively for the use of the driver, so the exploitation of the reservoir allowed for this fluid is in theory permitted. The idea would be that the drink system fluid would be piped to pass directly into the airstream within the wheel bodywork to help influence cooling. An alternative idea would be for the liquid to be piped to the driver through the wheel bodywork, but then incidentally leak. This could quite literally be called tyre water, perhaps of the variety Zak Brown was spotted drinking on the pit wall in Miami. This leakage could either go directly into the airstream or onto mechanical components, with the aim of further enhancing the cooling effect. The FIA's response is that irrespective of whether or not the liquid is stored within the wheel bodywork or is sent there, it would still be considered liquid cooling of the brakes, so contravene Article 11.5 and also most likely 10.8.4d. Thermoelectric cooling. While all the concepts involving liquid cooling of the brakes and wheel bodywork were declared illegal, one other area of interest has been suggested, and intriguingly, not all of it has been instantly dismissed by the FIA. The idea would be not to use a liquid at all, but to create a design that featured thermoelectric cooling. Such devices are mentioned in Article 15.4.1 of the technical regulations, which outlaws the shape-changing materials that some suggested could be employed within the wheel bodywork, but are actually illegal for use in wheels. In the list of materials that are banned totally in F1, the rules include shape memory materials except for piezoelectric materials used in electrical sensors. Piezoelectric materials are substances that generate an electric charge when subjected to mechanical stress, or conversely, change shape when subjected to an electric field. So in theory, a design could be created that would use such piezoelectric materials to help cool electrical sensors within the wheel bodywork, and therefore have a secondary influence in helping keep a lid on the wheel bodywork temperature. The FIA's response here doesn't follow the previous pattern of it being outlawed as something that could help maintain tyre temperatures. Instead, the FIA said it would only consider such a device illegal if it made such drastic changes to the system the sensors were measuring that it could be considered an actuator. A separate suggestion of using what is known as a Peltier device in this area has also not received automatic pushback. Peltier devices are solid-state thermoelectric modules that can be used to either heat something up or cool it down. They make use of an electrical current flowing through two dissimilar conductors to trigger heat to either be emitted or absorbed at the junction of the materials. By making use of electrical currents, the square or rectangular blocks that make up Peltier devices can be attached in areas where either cooling or heating is required, and you can switch between the two by changing the electrical current. So, with reference to the quest to reduce temperatures inside the wheel bodywork, a design could incorporate having such Peltier devices fitted somewhere within the assembly that could then be used to cool things down or even heat things up. With there being no moving parts on a Peltier device, it conforms to the technical rules that require everything to be rigidly attached to the upright. The FIA's response on the idea of using such a solid-state thermoelectric cooler is intriguing. The FIA's answer says, "We believe that the use of Peltier devices for cooling in this area is not covered by the technical regulations, but would not consider it favourably and would seek to specifically exclude it for 2026. In other words, the rules do not expressly forbid it right now. So, while the FIA said it would not especially like teams doing it, F1 designers don't operate in a world where they simply try to please the governing body. They are more interested in making their cars go faster. Whether or not such Peltier devices could be incorporated within wheel bodywork in such a way to both fully comply with other regulations but also help with cooling is something only F1 teams will know, but the FIA's stance will certainly have triggered them to get their thinking caps on. And despite the FIA having given McLaren's own wheel assembly and brake system the all clear after multiple inspections, including a specific check after the Miami Grand Prix, it would appear its rival's quest for answers is far from over.